Boss spotted poor Maid breastfeeding his baby, then he took an unexpected action. The silence was a suffocating wait, a stark and eerie contrast to the furious high-pitched wail that had filled the opulent mansion for the last 2 hours. Little Leo, a fragile bundle of silk blankets and frantic energy, was inconsolable. His small body shook with each shuddering sob, his face a mottled red, his fists clenched as he screamed into the cavernous quiet of the living room. Lena, the maid, felt a knot of cold panic tightening in her chest. The regular nanny had called in sick, and all her desperate attempts to soothe the baby had failed spectacularly. She had tried everything, singing soft lullabies, offering the pre-prepared bottle of formula, even walking the perimeter of the grand room until her feet ached with exhaustion. Nothing worked. His cries were not just loud, they were filled with a deep primal hunger, a desperate call that went beyond simple fussiness. The doctor had said he needed a specific, nutrient-rich formula, something his mother, gone now, had painstakingly sourced. But the formula was gone, and the baby was starving. A thought, both audacious and forbidden, flashed in her mind. It was a line she knew, without a doubt, she should never cross. She was the help, the one who cleaned floors and polished silver, the invisible presence in this house of immense wealth. Her job was to maintain order, not to nurture the heir of a rich man, a millionaire whose fortune was as vast as the sky. But looking at Leo, his little body trembling with a kind of despair she understood all too well, her heart broke. The strict rules, the immense chasm in their social standing, the unspoken boundaries that governed their every interaction. None of it mattered in that moment. All she saw was a baby in pain, a baby who needed her. She moved to a quiet, discreet corner of the room, away from the watchful eye of the security cameras she knew were everywhere, and with a soft, comforting murmur, she carefully began to feed the hungry boy with her own milk. Before we dive deeper into this journey, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. The change was instantaneous and breathtaking. The high-pitched wail softened into little whimpers, then to a contented hum. His small hands, which had been clenched so tightly, relaxed and curled gently around her finger. Relief, a profound and overwhelming sense of it, washed over her like a warm wave. He was quiet, finally. As she sat there, a silent portrait of a mother comforting a child, the moment felt sacred, a secret shared between two souls. But that fragile serenity was brutally shattered by the sharp, unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door lock. It was Marcus Thorne. The man who owned this house, the man whose face adorned every business magazine, the man she knew was home. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She was caught. Her mind raced, a chaotic storm of fear and panic. What would she say? How could she possibly explain this? She had committed an act of pure kindness, yes, but in a world built on rules and expectations, it felt like an unforgivable betrayal. He was home. He was standing in the doorway. And he was about to see everything. The door clicked shut with a soft, final sound that seemed to echo in the sudden cavernous stillness of the mansion. Marcus Thorne stood in the grand entryway, a tall, imposing figure whose presence was as silent as it was powerful. He wasn't shouting, wasn't even speaking. He just stood there, his eyes, usually as sharp and calculating as a financial analyst's, scanning the immense living room. A faint, almost imperceptible frown creased his brow. He had come home braced for the usual storm of furious wails from his son, a relentless, heartbreaking soundtrack he had become grimly accustomed to since his wife's death. Instead, he was met with an unsettling, profound silence. A silence so complete it felt unnatural, as if the very air had been vacuum-sealed. And then he saw her. Lena was on the plush sofa, a gentle smile on her face, her head bent over his son. The baby, little Leo, was fast asleep in her arms, his small face peaceful, a picture of perfect contentment. Her stillness was a beacon in the storm of his grief, a soft counterpoint to the chaos he carried inside. For a moment he simply stared, unable to process the serene scene before him, the image so at odds with everything he knew to be true. Lena's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. She looked up, her gaze meeting his, and saw no anger, no shock, just an unreadable, intense scrutiny. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged with unspoken questions, with a tension so thick it felt like a physical weight in the air. He walked closer, his steps slow and deliberate, a figure of silent authority closing in. She braced herself for the shouting, for the swift dismissal she knew was coming, for the sharp accusations that would tear her world apart. But the words never came. He stood over her, his long shadow falling across her and the sleeping baby. He looked down at his son, and for a fleeting second, his stern features softened into an expression of profound relief. He reached out a hand, as if to touch the baby's rosy cheek, but pulled it back, a flicker of something she couldn't name, sadness? Regret? In his eyes. "He's quiet," he said, his voice a low, rumbling statement of utter disbelief. It was all he said. She gripped the blanket tighter, her mind scrambling for a defense. "I just sang to him, sir," she stammered, her voice a barely audible whisper. He just needed to be held. He didn't look convinced. His gaze, still an unblinking weight on her, lingered on the small, peaceful face of his son. The silence returned, more suffocating than before. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving Lena in a state of confused terror. He knew. She was certain of it. His silence was far more terrifying than any shouting could have been, a silent threat that left her with a gnawing feeling of dread. It was the silence of a man who was observing, who was thinking, who was gathering information. It was the silence of a man with immense wealth who was not driven by simple emotions, but by a complex, methodical process she couldn't comprehend. She had to wonder what his next move would be, what a millionaire of his fortune would do after witnessing such an intimate and forbidden act. The quiet was a sign of a storm yet to come. She was a bird caught in the calm eye of a hurricane, and she knew the true tempest was just beginning to brew. The days that followed were a blur of nervous tension and mounting dread. The silence from Marcus Thorne was the most unsettling part of it all. He wasn't overtly hostile, but his presence felt like a constant, watchful eye. He seemed to find excuses to be in the same room whenever she was caring for Leo. He'd sit in his armchair, a business report in his hands, but his gaze would often drift to her, a silent, weighty presence she could feel on her back. He'd ask questions, not in a confrontational way, but in a quiet, probing manner that made her feel as though she were under a microscope. "Do you have children, Lena?" he asked one afternoon, his eyes fixed on her as she polished a silver picture frame. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice tight with suppressed fear. "A little boy. He's my everything." She felt a pang of profound vulnerability, wondering how much he already knew, how much he had already uncovered. His questions became more pointed, more personal. "It must be hard," he said another day, his voice low. "Raising a child on your own. I imagine money can be a real struggle." She simply nodded, unable to trust her voice. Each conversation felt like a careful, terrifying dance around a truth she could not reveal. She was a bird in a cage, and the walls were closing in. The fear of being fired was a constant companion, a heavy cloak she couldn't shed. This wasn't just a job, it was her lifeline. Every cent she earned was carefully allocated to medical bills, to a special diet, to the expensive medication her son, Jordan, needed to manage a rare congenital heart condition. The thought of losing this income, this one chance at providing for him, made her stomach churn with a deep, consuming fear. She knew with a bone-deep certainty that her son's health and future depended on her ability to keep this job, to weather this silent storm. One morning, she saw him on his laptop in the study, a spreadsheet open. He closed it with lightning speed when she entered the room, but not before she caught a glimpse of a name on the screen that made her blood run cold. Hers. He was doing research on her. But why? What was he trying to find? Was he gathering information to use against her, to justify her firing and erase her from his life with the cold efficiency of a rich man who had no time for messy human emotions? The mystery deepened, and with it, her fear. She knew she had to be careful, to be a ghost in this house, to give him no reason, no proof to act. But the final terrifying blow came a few days later. As she was walking home from work, she saw a car, a dark sedan, parked a few houses down. She hadn't thought anything of it until she saw it again the next day, and the day after that. It was always there, always watching. A chill ran down her spine. He wasn't just investigating her from his computer. The man with a measurable fortune had hired a private investigator to follow her. The stakes were no longer just her job, they were her entire life. Lena's world was a constant, terrifying tightrope walk, a precarious balance between two starkly opposing realities. In the opulent Thorne mansion, she was a quiet shadow, a diligent worker serving a man of immense wealth. Her movements were silent, her presence almost invisible as she cleaned the impossibly shiny floors and polished the priceless silverware. But in her small two-bedroom apartment, located on the far side of town, she was something else entirely. A mother, a protector, a warrior fighting an unseen battle for her son's life. The contrast was a painful, constant reminder of the two separate worlds she inhabited. Her son Jordan was the sun in her sky, a bright, beautiful boy with a mischievous smile and a laugh that could make her forget all her worries. But he was also the source of her greatest fear. He had a rare congenital heart condition, a ticking clock that demanded constant medication, frequent hospital visits, and a major life-saving surgery in the very near future. The thought of the surgery alone was enough to send a shiver of dread down her spine. The medical bills were already astronomical, a towering monument of debt that she chipped away at, little by little, with every cent she earned. She worked 2 other jobs on top of being a maid for the Thorne family, often returning home so late that she only had a few precious hours to spend with her son before she had to sleep. The exhaustion was a heavy blanket, a constant weight on her shoulders, but the love for her son was a powerful engine, a force that propelled her forward. She never complained. She never gave up. She was fueled by the simple, powerful desire to give her son a future, a chance at a normal life free from pain and limitations. A rich man's son lived in a world of limitless money, but her son lived in a world where a single hospital bill could spell disaster. One evening, as she was tidying up Marcus's vast and meticulously organized study, she saw a picture on his desk. It was of a beautiful woman, a radiant smile on her face, her eyes sparkling with life and laughter. It was his late wife, Sarah. There was a profound, aching sadness in Marcus's gaze as he looked at the photograph when he thought no one was watching. Lena saw it, and for the first time, she saw him not as a rich and powerful figure, but as a man who had lost his great love. It was a moment of connection, of shared human pain. But as she was about to leave the room, her eyes fell on a small framed photograph on a side table. It was a picture of her and Jordan, taken on his last birthday. It was a picture she kept in her purse, a simple, cherished memento. She had no idea how it had gotten there. It wasn't a mistake, it was placed there deliberately. A cold wave of fear washed over her. He had been looking through her personal belongings. He wasn't just investigating her, he was inside her life, an invisible, omnipotent presence. The moment of truth arrived with a cold, unforgiving finality. The tension that had been simmering for days finally boiled over. Marcus Thorne called Lena into his vast, meticulously organized office, a room filled with a kind of minimalist high-end furniture that screamed money. He didn't beat around the bush, didn't try to make it easy. "I know," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I know you breastfed my son." Lena's world stopped. The air left her lungs in a silent rush. She felt a wave of dizzying defeat wash over her, a crushing sense of inevitability. All her fears, all her anxieties, all the silent, watchful days had been leading to this moment. The jig was up. She looked down at the expensive Persian rug, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice a defeated whisper. "I know I crossed a line. He was just so hungry, and I..." She trailed off, her heart a heavy, sinking stone in her chest. She braced herself for the inevitable shouting, for the sharp final words that would end her employment and with it, her son's hope for a future. But again, the expected reaction never came. The room was filled with a thick, suffocating silence. He was still standing, his back to her, looking out the large floor-to-ceiling window at the city skyline, a landscape of immense fortune he had built with his own 2 hands. "I also know about your son," he said, his voice still low, but with a hint of something she couldn't place. "About Jordan. About his heart condition." Her head snapped up. How could he possibly know that? The thought was terrifying, a violation of her deepest, most guarded secret. He turned around, his face no longer a mask of cold professionalism, but a complex tapestry of emotions. There was no anger, no accusation. There was something else, something she had never seen before, a profound sadness and a glimmer of something that looked like hope. I know you didn't do it for money, Lena. I know you did it out of kindness. Pure, unconditional kindness." The words hung in the air, a complete reversal of everything she had expected. The confrontation wasn't about punishment, it was about something else entirely. She stared at him, bewildered. She didn't understand. Why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he firing her? The suspense was almost unbearable, a tightening coil in her gut. He took a deep, shaky breath, his gaze fixed on her. The rich millionaire she knew was gone, replaced by a man on the edge of a precipice. "I have a question for you, Lena," he said, his voice laced with emotion. "A very serious question." The words were a cliffhanger, a moment that would change the course of both their lives forever. The question hung in the air, a silent prelude to a revelation that would shatter Lena's perception of everything she thought she knew. Marcus Thorne stood before her, no longer the cold, unreachable millionaire she had feared, but a man on the precipice of a confession. He took a deep, shaky breath, his gaze fixed on Lena's stunned face. "You asked why I knew about your son," he began, his voice a low, emotional rumble that was nothing like his usual controlled tone. "I know because I wanted to. I had my investigator look into your life, not to find something to use against you, but because I saw something in you that I haven't seen in a very long time. Empathy. Unconditional love." He paused, his eyes turning misty, a profound sadness clouding their depths. "My wife, Sarah, was a beautiful soul. When she was diagnosed with cancer, the hardest part wasn't the treatments or the pain. It was knowing she wouldn't be able to provide for our baby. The chemotherapy made her body unable to produce milk. It was a pain that broke her heart and mine, a cruel reminder of the one bond she couldn't give her son." Lena felt her own eyes well up with tears. The arrogance and coldness she had always seen in him were gone, stripped away to reveal a raw, painful vulnerability. The rich man was gone. Here was a grieving husband and a worried father. She wanted so badly for Leo to have the bond that only a mother's milk can create. When she passed, I tried everything. Different formulas, different bottles, but nothing worked. His cries were a constant reminder of what he was missing, and of what I had lost. I felt like a failure, unable to give my son the one thing his mother had so desperately wanted for him. A fortune of a man, and I couldn't solve a simple problem of nourishment and love. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading, filled with a desperate hope. "When I came home that day and saw you, a woman who had nothing to gain from it, giving my son the one thing I couldn't, it wasn't a betrayal to me. It was a miracle. It was an answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was saying." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of desperation and hope. "Lena, I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to ask you to do me the greatest favor of my life. I want you to be Leo's wet nurse. I want to pay you a large sum of money. Enough to pay off all your debts, enough to get your son the best possible treatment, enough to secure his future. It's not a job, Lena. It's a partnership, a bond. For a man who has every fortune in the world, the greatest wealth I could ever imagine is knowing my son is being cared for with love and compassion. This isn't about me buying your services. This is about me asking for your help, for your profound kindness, to give my son a chance at the same love his mother wanted for him. It's about me recognizing that my money can't fix everything, but that your humanity might be able to. It's about finding a way for two broken families to become whole. Please, tell me you'll consider it." The investigation wasn't a threat, it was the desperate act of a father seeking a new family for his child, a new life for them all. He wasn't a villain, he was a man in immense pain, and he was offering her the chance to heal both their lives. Lena stood there, processing the weight of his words. The shock of the revelation slowly gave way to an overwhelming sense of relief and a profound, bone-deep gratitude. The man she had feared, the man who represented a world of unapproachable wealth and cold-hearted transactions, was now standing before her, a raw and vulnerable human being. He was offering her not just a job, but a lifeline, a way to save her son. It wasn't about the money, it was about the act of a father helping another parent in need, a deep acknowledgement of her character and her immense capacity for love. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes. Thank you." And so began a new chapter, a beautiful and unconventional alliance forged in the fires of grief, love, and compassion. Lena became more than a maid. She became an integral part of their family. She was there for Leo's first steps, for his first words, for his first scraped knee. She was no longer a shadow in the mansion, but a beacon of warmth and stability, her laughter echoing through the halls. Marcus, in turn, became her staunchest ally. He used his immense fortune not just to pay for Jordan's surgery, but to create the Sarah Thorne Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping single mothers and their children with urgent medical needs. He honored his late wife's memory by turning his grief into a force for good, transforming a personal tragedy into a legacy of hope. He realized that the greatest wealth was not the numbers in his bank account, but the ability to help others, to bring a little light into the lives of those who needed it most. The bond between Marcus and Lena grew into a profound, lasting friendship, a connection built on mutual respect and a shared sense of parenthood. They were no longer boss and employee, but two people who understood each other's pain and found a way to heal together. They were two broken pieces that, when put together, created something new and whole. The story of the rich millionaire and the poor maid became a silent legend in their community, a whispered tale of how empathy and kindness can bridge the widest of gaps. It was a story that proved that true fortune isn't found in the houses we build or the money we accumulate, but in the connections we forge with others, in the love we choose to share, and in the family we find in the most unexpected places. In the end, they both found their greatest fortune not in the luxury of a mansion, but in the simple, unconditional love of a found family. They had all they needed, and the wealth of the world couldn't have bought them more happiness. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share this video and tell us in the comments, what part of this journey moved you the most? There's another story waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.